Thank you, President Riccobano, for those nice words. And thank you for inviting me to be a presenter here this evening. And I'd also like to thank my wife, Lori, for all that she does with our business. She does all the hard work, and I get to have all the fun creating sculptors. Yes, I am a sculptor. I am Native American. I am 100% blind, and I have minimal feeling and dexterity in my right hand. I was fortunate that I was able to see for the first 23 years of my life, but I only have 15 minutes to pack 75 years in here, so I better get started. I was born in Santa Fe and raised on Santa Clara Pueblo Indian Reservation in north central New Mexico. At the age of 10, my parents moved to Taos, 75 miles up the road. And on my way home from school, I would stop in front of galleries while walking through town and look in the windows, and I would see these bronze sculptures, and I would think someday I would like to be able to do that. So the seed was planted early on. Fortunately, my mother was a potter, so there was clay around that I could work with frequently. And as I grew older as a teenager, my pieces became more sculptural. And, and with time, they did get better. And I did take art classes in college. But in June of 1967, I was drafted. I received a letter from the Army that said, "Greetings from the Department of the US Army." And I ended up in Vietnam in November of that year. And on January the 8th, in 1968, our platoon got caught in an ambush. And a hand grenade was thrown at me. And I started to turn towards it as it gently hit my hand, and it rolled away before I ever got to see it. And that was the last time I would be able to see the light of day. And that wasn't far from the South China Sea. Over the years, I've been able to go many places with my work, and it's taken us many places. And it's given me a very interesting and exciting life for my wife and my children. In October of 1967, I ended up back home after being in hospitals for 8 months, the last two being at the Western Blind Rehabilitation Center in Palo Alto, California. And when I returned home, my parents and my brothers and my sisters were so nice, kind, and there's just too much TLC that I couldn't live, I couldn't survive, I couldn't breathe. So I wanted freedom, independence. And so I talked to a sister, and on the 1st of January in 1969, she helped me find an apartment in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And there I talked to some artists who helped me find the materials I needed to create sculptures. So I went to the state library and got a bunch of talking books and bought the materials I needed for sculpting. And I remember in the old days, those vinyl records, and with my waxy hands, I would try to pick up that arm gently when the record stuck, and there'd go another little scratch on the record. I would work during the night frequently, day and night sometimes. But as the weeks went by, my pieces got better. And so I would throw them back into the wax pots. And I knew that with time, I would come up with pieces that I would eventually cast into bronze. Eventually, I got 3 pieces in bronze, and I went to look for a gallery to represent me. The first gallery said, "I'm sorry, but we have enough bronze sculptures." The second gallery said the same thing. And it's difficult to be rejected because so much of your soul goes into your work. And in the third gallery, they accepted my work, And in a week or two, they sold a piece. And over the next several years, they sold a large number of pieces. Pieces started appearing, articles started appearing in newspapers, magazines, and now and then something on television. And then we started having shows in museums and in galleries. And we would go to a museum and they would say, sorry, but we have no touch policy. And they'd say, but over here we have a small collection of items the visually impaired can look at. And they'd show me a doorknob, a carved door, an urn, but that really wasn't what I wanted to see. And on other occasions, they would say, we do have some pieces for the visually impaired, but you have to wear gloves. And I would say, no, I can't do that. But imagine this. If you went into a museum and you were sighted and they handed you a pair of dark glasses and you put them on, and then they turned the lights down and they said, now enjoy these great pieces of art, what would that individual do? He would probably say, no. And that's just what I would always do when they offered me gloves. I was working in my studio, and my wife came into the studio, and I was making a crucifix, and she said, Michael, you should give one of those to the Pope. And I thought to myself, she's crazy. And when she left a few minutes later, I picked up the phone and I called the social worker at the VA, and he said he would work on it. And off and on over the next 2 years, he would call and he'd say that we're still working on it. And then one day he called and said, you have a papal audience. And he gave me 3 dates. So we picked the first date, April the 13th in 1983. And we had a meeting with Pope John Paul II. And after our papal audience, we had photos of my work, and a letter of introduction that I was a sculptor. And the people in Italy love their sculptors. And they would give me a guard when we walked into a museum after they looked at our material. And I was able to touch whatever I wanted. And Lori knew what I wanted to touch, so she would direct the guard to that area. And other people would see me touching, and then they'd stick their hand out to touch something, and the guard would start shouting at them, and they would wonder, why can he touch and why can't I? But I had the best time. And we ended up on that trip at the Academy Gallery in Florence at the feet of Michelangelo's David. And the guard asked if I wanted a chair when I reached up and touched his foot. And I thought with a chair, perhaps I could touch his ankle. And I said, no, thank you. But 3 years later, when the museum was closed, they built a scaffolding for me. And for 3 hours, I looked at Michelangelo's David from head to toe. And I'll always remember those 3 hours. So with all these experiences with museums, accessibility became an extremely important factor in our thoughts of shows. And so we set about trying to find out where we could have a touchable exhibit, totally accessible. And so we went and contacted the Idle-Jorg Museum in Indianapolis, Indiana, and they agreed to do this. And we had 30 pieces there. And when the show was started, people would come into our gallery and they would look at the sign that said, please touch. And they would do a double take. And they would be tentative at first. Then they would start slowly touching the pieces. And before long, you could really see them looking at them. And the little kids, oh, they were great. Their little hands could move around fast enough to look at the pieces. And the adults at times would come up with tears in their eyes saying, I've always wanted to do this. And interestingly enough, at this moment, there are 30 pieces at that same museum in Indiana at the Idle-Jorg. And the show opened in early February, and we were there. And there are 30 pieces there, many of them from the Tia collection. And it is fully accessible. And a week or so after the show opened, COVID came and the show was closed. The museum was closed. But fortunately, they extended the show to the end of the year, so hopefully people will be able to come in and see them at some point. And interestingly enough, we also have another show in North Central New Mexico at the Millicent Rogers Museum. There, once again, there are about 30 pieces there, and they're totally accessible. But that show never opened, so the pieces are standing there waiting to be touched. And hopefully that show will also happen. I've been so fortunate in being able to follow my dreams over these last 75 years and doing what I really wanted to do, create sculptures. And we have two daughters, and the oldest used to be a television producer, and she's making a video of my work, my sculptures. And if you look up her website, dreamtouchbelieve.com, it has closed captioning and audio description. And hopefully you'll look it up and see what you get there. But I am so grateful for all the places and all the people that we've seen. Places and people we never expected to meet over these years. And so art has been wonderful, and it's an extremely good way of communicating with people. Thank you.